It wasn't the crying child that made Richard Hamilton stop his car. It was the necklace around her neck, a tiny gold pendant engraved with his family name, Hamilton. For 5 years he'd searched for it. He'd turned his mansion upside down, questioned every maid, every driver, every security guard. That necklace wasn't just gold. It was heritage, his late mother's gift, a symbol of everything sacred in his bloodline. And yet here it was, gleaming against the chest of a dusty, barefoot little girl who couldn't have been more than 5. The child was crying, her cheeks streaked with tears and dirt. She clutched a crumpled note and a few folded bills in one tiny hand, running down the cracked sidewalk like the city itself had turned against her. Richard's heart slammed against his ribs. "Stop the car," he barked. The driver hit the brakes so hard the tires screeched. Before the man could ask anything, Richard threw the door open and stepped out into the scorching sunlight. His expensive shoes sank into the dust as he hurried toward the girl. "Hey, sweetheart," he called softly. "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" The child stopped. Her small shoulders shook as she turned to face him. Her wide brown eyes were full of fear and innocence. "My mommy's sick," she sniffled. "She told me to buy medicine." Richard crouched to her level. "Medicine?" She nodded and held out the note. The paper trembled in her tiny hand. He glanced at it. A doctor's prescription, painkillers, antibiotics, a weak handwriting at the bottom that looked like desperation itself. He forced a gentle smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll get your mommy her medicine, okay?" The little girl blinked, unsure. Then Richard's gaze dropped again, to the gold glint on her neck. He froze. His throat tightened. For a moment he forgot how to breathe. That necklace, the one with the faint scratch on the back, from the day he was 10 and dropped it during fencing practice. He knew it like his own heartbeat. "Sweetheart," his voice trembled now. "Where did you get this necklace?" The girl stepped back, clutching it protectively. "Don't touch it," she said, fierce and trembling. "It's my daddy's necklace. Mommy said so." Richard's breath caught. My daddy's necklace. He stared at her. Really looked now. The curls, the faint dimple on her cheek, the soft nose. Something inside him twisted sharply, like memory struggling to surface. "Your daddy's?" he whispered. "What's his name?" She shook her head. "I don't know. Mommy doesn't tell me. But she said he was kind, and that this necklace is the only thing he left." The world tilted slightly around him. Cars honked somewhere far away, but Richard barely heard. He swallowed hard. "And your mommy, what's her name?" "Naomi," the girl said, her eyes bright with tears again. "She's very sick. Please, sir, I need to go." Naomi. The name hit him like an echo. Familiar, faint, from a forgotten night buried under guilt and alcohol. He stood abruptly, signaling his driver. "Go to the nearest pharmacy," he ordered. "Buy everything on this list, now." The driver ran off. Then he turned back to the little girl and gently took her hand. "Take me to your mommy, okay?" She hesitated. "You'll help her?" "Yes," he said, voice breaking slightly. "I'll help her, I promise." She nodded. Her tiny fingers slipped into his palm. Warm, trembling, trusting. And so they walked together down the dusty street, a billionaire in a tailored black suit and a barefoot little girl with his lost gold necklace shining on her chest. Richard's mind raced. Naomi, a necklace, a child, 5 years missing. It couldn't be. And yet deep down, he already knew. They reached a small, run-down house with a rusted tin roof and peeling blue paint. The girl pushed the wooden door open and ran inside. "Mommy, Mommy, I brought someone." Richard stepped in behind her. The air smelled of soap and sickness. A woman lay on a thin mattress on the floor, her face pale and glistening with sweat. Her breathing was shallow. When she looked up, her eyes, large, dark, and weary, met his. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then faintly she whispered, "Who are you?" Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because suddenly everything clicked. The gold necklace, the name Naomi, the faint perfume in the air that he didn't realize he still remembered. 5 years ago, the hotel, the night he'd been too broken to think, too drunk to remember. And this woman, This fragile, trembling woman lying before him was the stranger who had changed his life forever. The little girl stood between them, clutching the necklace proudly. "Mommy," she said softly, "this is the man who helped me. He bought your medicine." Naomi smiled weakly, unaware that fate itself had just walked through her door. Richard could only stare at the woman, at the child, at the necklace gleaming between them, and feel his world quietly, irrevocably shift. Long before the day a billionaire entered her broken room, Naomi's life had been a long conversation with struggle. She had known hunger like a neighbor. She'd known exhaustion as a friend. Every morning she woke up in a small room with peeling walls and whispered the same prayer: "Maybe today will be different." Her best friend Glory was her only constant. Cheerful, loud, endlessly hopeful. They shared everything: food, rent, dreams. Glory sold cheap clothes at the market, while Naomi cleaned offices part-time. Some nights they laughed until midnight about the future they might never have. But on one bright morning, something did change. Naomi woke early, her heart beating fast. Her hands trembled as she brushed her hair. Today was her interview at the Hamilton Grand Hotel, one of the biggest in the city. Glory fixed her dress with the careful hands of a sister. "You'll get the job," Glory said firmly. "You're smart, you're kind, and you've been through fire already. Go shine." Naomi smiled nervously. Her best dress was clean but faded. Her shoes squeaked with age. Still, she held her chin high as she boarded the bus. When she arrived at the hotel, she felt like she had stepped into another universe. The marble floors gleamed. The air smelled of roses and power. She waited among other applicants, polished people with perfect smiles, and tried not to feel small. The interview was a blur of questions. Can you handle pressure? Are you willing to work nights? Do you have any experience? Naomi answered honestly, her voice trembling but clear. She told them about cleaning offices, about her work ethic, about her dreams of someday running a housekeeping department. When the manager finally smiled and said, "Congratulations, Miss Naomi. You're hired," her knees nearly gave way. She went home half running, half crying. Glory screamed when she heard the news and hugged her so tightly Naomi could barely breathe. "I told you, God finally looked your way." That night they decided to celebrate. "Let's go to the club," Glory insisted. "Just one night. You've worked too hard to stay home now." Naomi shook her head. "You know I'm not that kind of girl." "Please," Glory begged. "You've never gone out. Tonight we dance for your new beginning." And so, after much pleading and laughter, Naomi agreed. She didn't know that one decision, one harmless night of celebration, would rewrite the rest of her life. The club was alive with noise and light. Music pulsed like electricity, spilling through flashing lights and laughter. Naomi had never seen anything like it. People moved like waves, beautiful, reckless, loud. She wore a simple black dress that hugged her shyly. It wasn't glamorous, but her natural grace made her glow anyway. For a while, she even laughed. She let the music carry her worries away. Then her head began to ache. It started as a dull throb behind her eyes, then turned into a heavy fog. She'd taken painkillers earlier that day for her migraines. Strong ones, the kind that usually knocked her out. Combined with the noise, the lights, and an empty stomach, the world began to spin. She turned to Glory, her hand trembling. "I need to rest," she murmured. Glory looked concerned. "Are you okay? Do you want me to come?" "No, I'll be fine. I just need to lie down for a bit." She left the dance floor, the crowd swallowing her up. Upstairs, the hallway was dim and quiet. She wandered until she found a door left slightly open. A hotel room, dark but clean. Naomi hesitated. She didn't know why it was open. Maybe a guest forgot to lock it. Maybe a staff member was cleaning. But her head pounded so badly that she could barely think. "I'll just rest for a few minutes," she whispered. She slipped inside and lay down on the bed, shoes and all. The pillow was soft, the air cool. Within moments, the world faded. Naomi fell into a deep, heavy sleep. That same night, across town, Richard Hamilton sat alone in his car with tears burning his eyes. He was everything people admired. Handsome, successful, rich. But tonight he was just a man betrayed. His business partner, a childhood friend, had stolen millions from him and vanished overseas. The media would call it a scandal by morning. He drove aimlessly until he ended up outside a club, the same one Naomi and Glory had gone to. He drank too much, trying to drown the betrayal, the anger, the loneliness. By the time his men carried him upstairs to a private hotel room, he could barely stand. The door to his suite had been left half open. He didn't notice. When he staggered inside, he saw a figure lying on the bed. A woman, quiet and still. In his half-drunken daze, he thought his friends had arranged for company to cheer him up. Something he never asked for, but in that moment of pain, he didn't question. He sat beside her, staring at her sleeping face. Peaceful, innocent. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know her story. And in a blur of confusion, grief, and weakness, their fates became entangled. The morning came like judgment. Naomi woke to a blinding headache and a stranger's absence. The sheets were rumpled. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. She froze. Confusion turned into panic. "What happened?" she whispered, her voice trembling. On the pillow beside her lay a gold necklace, heavy, gleaming, with the name R. Hamilton engraved across the pendant. Her heart pounded. She didn't know who he was. She didn't even remember his face, but she felt something deep inside her, an instinct that this moment, this mistake, would follow her forever. She picked up the necklace, slipped it into her bag, and ran home through the sunrise, tears stinging her eyes. Glory was waiting at the door, terrified. "Naomi, where were you? I've been calling." Naomi couldn't speak. She just collapsed into her friend's arms and cried until her voice broke. She didn't know it yet, but inside her, a new heartbeat had already begun. For weeks after that night, Naomi lived in a blur of shame and silence. She couldn't bring herself to tell Glory everything. Not the parts that haunted her, not the fragments that made her wake up sweating at night. She only said she'd fallen asleep in the wrong place. That was easier to believe. Every time she opened her small dresser drawer and saw the gold necklace, her chest tightened. Its weight wasn't just physical, it was a memory she couldn't escape. She sometimes turned it over in her palm, tracing the engraving. R. Hamilton. Who was he? What kind of man left behind something so valuable? She imagined hundreds of possibilities. A foreign businessman, a rich tourist, maybe even a politician. None of them made sense. All she knew was that he had vanished like smoke. And then one morning, her body betrayed her. She woke nauseous. The smell of fried oil from the neighbor's kitchen made her gag. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. At first, she thought it was food poisoning, but the next day it happened again. And again, Glory noticed first. "Naomi, you've been pale all week. Are you sick?" "I'm fine," Naomi lied. But she wasn't. Her hands trembled every time she tried to eat. Her energy vanished. She felt dizzy even standing. When the nausea became unbearable, she walked to a small neighborhood clinic. The nurse smiled kindly and took a few tests. Naomi waited on a hard bench, her heart hammering. Minutes later, the nurse returned, cheerful, oblivious. "Congratulations," she said. "You're 1 month pregnant." Naomi stared blankly. "What?" The nurse repeated it, slower this time, as though she hadn't heard. "You're going to have a baby." The words sliced through her like lightning. A baby. Her throat went dry. The room swayed. She stumbled out of the clinic in a daze. The nurse's cheerful, "Take care of yourself," echoing behind her like a cruel joke. Outside, the sun blazed, bright and merciless. She walked home without feeling her feet touch the ground. When she reached her small room, she sat on the floor and cried until she couldn't breathe. "I don't even know his name," she whispered to the empty walls. "I don't even know his face." Her hands drifted to her stomach, trembling. There was life inside her, fragile, unexpected, terrifying. "God, why me?" she cried. "I have no family, no money. Why now?" Her sobs were the only answer. The door creaked open quietly. Glory stepped in, carrying a bag of beans and bread. She froze when she saw Naomi curled up on the floor, shaking. "Naomi? What happened? You're scaring me." Naomi lifted her head. Her face was streaked with tears. "I'm pregnant, Glory," she whispered. Glory's eyes widened. "What? But how?" Naomi's voice broke as she told her everything. The club, the dizziness, the room, the necklace, the faceless man who had been gone by morning. Glory sat still for a long time, silent. The only sound was the faint buzz of the city outside. Then she reached out and held Naomi's hand. "Listen," Glory said softly, "we'll find out who he is. We'll go back to that club. Maybe someone remembers him." Naomi shook her head hopelessly. "It's been a month. Nobody will remember." "Maybe they will. We'll try." The next day, they went together. It was daylight now and the club looked different, dead without its music. The lights were off, the smell of alcohol replaced by cleaning fluid. They approached the manager, a large man with tired eyes. "Good afternoon," Glory began politely. "Please, sir, my friend needs your help." He frowned. "What kind of help?" "She was here about a month ago. She got very sick and ended up in one of the hotel rooms upstairs. She woke up alone the next morning. Do you remember any man who booked a room that night? Someone rich, maybe drunk?" The manager sighed, already bored. "We see hundreds of people every night. I can't remember one face." Naomi reached into her bag and pulled out the necklace. "Please," she said, voice shaking. "He left this behind. Do you recognize it?" The manager squinted at the gold pendant. It gleamed even in the dim light. "No," he said finally. "Looks expensive, but I've never seen it." Naomi's shoulders slumped. Her hope deflated. A cleaner passed by, pushing a mop. Glory turned quickly. "Sister, do you remember a man who came in drunk last month? Maybe with bodyguards?" The woman frowned. "Many men come here drunk. I can't say." They asked 2 more employees. Nothing. No one knew. Naomi and Glory left the club slowly, their steps heavy. As they reached the street, Naomi stopped, tears gathering again. "No one knows him," she whispered. "What do I do now?" Glory took her hand. "You live," she said firmly. "You raise your child. You don't give up." Naomi looked down at her stomach. Still flat, still secret. She placed her palm there gently. "I don't know your father," she whispered, "but I promise to love you, to protect you." And that night when she lay in her bed, she made a vow, whispered to the darkness, to the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. "I may have nothing, but I'll give you everything I have." The months ahead were cruel. Her body weakened. Her morning sickness turned to exhaustion. Her once steady hands trembled at work. Some days she cleaned hotel rooms until her vision blurred. Her manager called her in one afternoon, his tone sharp. "Naomi, what's going on with you?" "I'm sorry, sir," she said weakly. "I've just been feeling dizzy, sleepy, careless." He cut in. "Guests are complaining. You're not the same. I'm sorry, but this hotel can't keep someone who can't work properly." Naomi's heart dropped. "You mean I'm fired?" He looked away. "You can pick up your pay tomorrow." When she stepped outside, the city felt colder. She sat on a cement bench, holding her bag close, and wept silently. Her only income, gone. Her only security, gone. That night she told Glory through tears. Glory hugged her tight and cried too. "You're not alone," she said. "We'll figure something out." Naomi nodded weakly, but inside she was breaking. Because even as her world fell apart, life inside her kept growing. Steady, unstoppable. And somewhere across the city, in a mansion full of glass and silence, Richard Hamilton stood before a mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, wondering absently where his favorite gold necklace had gone. He didn't know that the woman crying in a small rented room was carrying his child and his future. Rain became Naomi's lullaby. It fell often that season, washing over the rusted roofs of her neighborhood, whispering against her window like a prayer she no longer knew how to finish. She would lie awake most nights, hands pressed to her growing belly, listening to it fall. "Will you hate me for this life?" she'd ask silently. "Will you forgive me for not knowing your father?" By the time she was 6 months pregnant, the whispers around her had started. The old women at the corner stalls would lower their voices when she passed. No husband, no ring. Maybe she's one of those city girls. She kept walking, eyes fixed on the ground. Glory remained her only shield. Her friend found her small cleaning jobs, washing clothes for tenants, mopping floors in local shops. Anything that could buy bread and soap. Sometimes, when the nausea hit hard, Naomi would collapse mid-task. Yet she never stopped. She couldn't afford to. Every night, she would open the old wooden drawer beside her bed and stare at the necklace again. It gleamed faintly even in the dark. R. Hamilton. She would whisper it like a name of a ghost. Whoever he was, she wondered if he ever thought about that night. If he knew what had happened. If he would care. But the city was too big for dreams like that. Months passed. Then, one humid evening, the world shifted. Naomi felt a sharp pain, sudden and deep, slicing through her stomach. She gasped and fell to her knees, clutching her belly. Her breath came fast. "Glory!" she screamed. Glory rushed in, panicked. "Naomi, what's happening?" "I think it's time," Naomi gasped. There was no hospital money, no taxi fare. Glory grabbed a bucket, towels, and boiling water, shouting for the neighbor midwife. Hours blurred into cries and sweat and trembling hands. Then finally, a thin, soft wail filled the room. A girl. Naomi's eyes fluttered open, and the midwife placed the baby in her arms. She was small, pink, and fierce, alive against all odds. Naomi stared at her daughter's face and felt something inside her mend and break at once. "Vera," she whispered, "your name is Vera." It meant faith, and faith was all she had left. The early months were a blur of exhaustion. Vera cried often, hungry and restless. Naomi's milk was weak. Her meals were small. Some nights she had to choose between food for herself or medicine for her baby. She chose Vera every time. Glory helped as much as she could, but soon she got married and moved to another part of the city. Naomi smiled at the wedding, held back tears, and whispered, "Be happy, my sister." Then she walked home alone, her baby tied to her chest with a faded scarf. Meanwhile, in another world, a world of glass, marble, and perfume, Richard Hamilton had built higher walls around his heart. His company recovered from the betrayal, but he didn't. The headlines called him the Phoenix Millionaire for bouncing back after a scandal, but inside he was empty. He had money, cars, women who smiled too easily. But every night, when he removed his watch and tie, silence filled the mansion like smoke. He sometimes dreamed of that night. Flashes of a soft face, the scent of cheap soap and lavender, the sound of a woman breathing beside him. He'd wake up sweating, unsure if it was guilt or longing. And sometimes, when he adjusted his tie in the mirror, he would pause and glance at his reflection. Something was always missing, though he could never name what. Back in her small neighborhood, Naomi had learned to survive in fragments. She sold old clothes, washed dishes at roadside cafes, and prayed no one would steal her child while she worked. When Vera turned 1, Naomi made her a birthday cake from mashed yam and a single candle. They sang softly together, though Vera only clapped at the light. At night, when her daughter finally fell asleep, Naomi would sit by the window and whisper stories she made up, fairy tales of a rich man who would someday find them. She never said the man's name, but always in those stories, he came back. Years continued to grind forward. By the time Vera was 4, she had her mother's eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. She played with pebbles outside their door, making castles out of dirt. "Mommy, look!" she'd shout. "This is our palace." Naomi would smile faintly, hiding her tears. "Yes, my love, it's beautiful." One evening, Vera came home quiet. Her little shoes were dusty. "What's wrong, my baby?" Naomi asked. The girl hesitated. "Mommy, where is my daddy?" Naomi froze. "My friends at school have daddies," Vera continued. "They bring chocolates. They tell stories. I want one too." Naomi swallowed hard, forcing a smile. She reached for the drawer again and pulled out the necklace. "Your daddy left this," she said softly. "It's all we have of him." Vera's eyes widened with wonder. "This is my daddy's necklace?" Yes, sweetheart, it's yours now. Keep it safe. She fastened it around Vera's tiny neck. The pendant glowed against her small chest. I'll never take it off, Vera promised. When I wear it, I feel like Daddy's watching me. Naomi turned away, tears glistening in her eyes. Yes, my baby, she whispered. He's watching. That night, Naomi tucked Vera into bed and sat by the window again. The city lights flickered like distant stars. She thought of the man who had given her this child without knowing it. The man whose name she only knew from a necklace. She whispered into the night, Whoever you are, thank you. You gave me her. And somewhere across the city, Richard Hamilton sat alone in his study, gazing at a framed photograph of his late mother. He reached for his neck, feeling the absence of something that had once rested there, a gold chain that never turned up again. He didn't know that at that very moment, a little girl was sleeping soundly under its glow. He didn't know that his bloodline was dreaming just a few miles away. 5 years had passed. The city had changed, but Naomi's small world hadn't. The walls of her rented room were the same faded yellow, the same patch of damp spreading like a slow bruise above the window. But inside those walls, something bright and alive filled the air. Vera's laughter. Naomi was 29 now. She had lines beneath her eyes and calluses on her palms. Her old dreams had burned away, replaced by one purpose: keeping her daughter safe. She worked long hours at a small restaurant downtown, scrubbing dishes, mopping floors, sometimes serving tables when they were short-staffed. The pay was barely enough, but she never complained. She'd learned to count joy in the small things: a free meal from a kind customer, Vera's drawings taped to the wall, the way her daughter's laughter could still sound like sunlight. That evening, Naomi sat on the floor sewing a torn uniform shirt. Vera, now 4, was sitting cross-legged beside her, coloring on an old newspaper. Mommy, Vera said suddenly, her tone curious and shy. Where is my daddy? Naomi froze, needle in midair. Vera looked up, wide-eyed. Jane's daddy brought her biscuits today, and Myra's daddy reads her stories. But I don't have one. The question came like a blade she had long feared. Naomi took a slow breath, forcing her hands to steady. Come here, my love, she whispered. Vera crawled into her lap. Naomi reached into the small wooden drawer of her bedside table, the one that had hidden the truth for years, and pulled out the gold necklace. The pendant caught the weak light and shimmered faintly. See this? Naomi said softly. It belonged to your daddy. Vera's eyes grew round with wonder. Really? Yes, Naomi smiled sadly. It's all he left behind. I don't know where he is now, but this is proof he was real, and he was good. The little girl touched it reverently with her tiny fingers. So, he gave it to you? Naomi nodded slowly. In a way, yes. It was the last thing he left for us. Vera's face lit up. Then it's mine now, because I'm his daughter. Naomi laughed softly through the ache in her chest. Yes, my brave girl, you are. She fastened the necklace gently around Vera's neck. It hung loosely over her small chest, the gold pendant gleaming like a secret sun. Promise me you'll never lose it, Naomi whispered. It's special. I promise, Vera said proudly. I'll show my friends at school and tell them I have a daddy too. Naomi's smile faltered, a flicker of pain behind her eyes. But she didn't stop her. She couldn't. Every child deserved a story, even if it was made of fragments and gold. She watched Vera spin around in the room, holding the pendant like it was magic, and for a moment, Naomi's tired heart found peace. Across the city, Richard Hamilton was also staring at gold, but not with peace. He sat in his vast office on the top floor of Hamilton Holdings, a glass tower that touched the clouds. The skyline glowed around him, but all he saw was reflection, his own face tired and polished, staring back. His father's words echoed in the back of his mind. Son, you're not getting any younger. You're 38. When will you settle down? Richard had smiled then, the way one does to end a conversation. Soon, Dad. I'll get married soon. His father, Chief Hamilton, had beamed. Good. Tricia is a fine woman. Beautiful, educated, from a good family. I like her. Richard had nodded. Yes, Dad. She's perfect. But perfection, he'd come to realize, was cold. Trisha, his girlfriend of 2 years, was elegance without warmth. Everything about her was polished, her smile, her perfume, her voice. Yet when she kissed him, he felt nothing but calculation. Still, he played the role, the devoted man, the ideal heir. Because what else was there? His life had become a performance, and he was the lead actor trapped in his own script. Sometimes in the quiet between meetings, he'd touch his neck, the place where his gold necklace used to rest, and feel that old emptiness again. He had hundreds of treasures, but that one loss still haunted him. He couldn't explain why. That afternoon, Trisha visited him in his mansion. She looked stunning as always. Red dress, pearl earrings, the faintest scent of vanilla. They sat in the living room drinking wine, talking about vacations and investments. But Richard barely listened. "Darling," she said suddenly, setting her glass down, "I have something to tell you." He looked up. She took a deep breath, pressed her hand to her stomach, and smiled sweetly. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Richard's eyes widened. "You're... what?" "I'm going to have your baby," she said softly. Richard stood, disbelief flashing across his face, then joy, then confusion. That's incredible," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You're serious?" She nodded, pretending to blush. For the first time in years, Richard felt something like purpose, a child. Maybe that's what his life had been missing. Maybe this was his chance to start fresh. He promised her everything: a visit to her parents, a future together, stability. He smiled for the first time in weeks, but Trisha's smile, hidden against his shoulder, was hollow, because she knew there was no baby. Not yet. Her friend Cynthia had told her the trick. "Tell him you're pregnant. He'll propose instantly." And so she lied. That same evening, in a quiet neighborhood far away from chandeliers and champagne, little Vera sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing. She'd sketched a heart, a stick figure mother, and beside them, a taller figure labeled Daddy. She wore her gold necklace proudly as she colored. "Look, Mommy," she said, holding up the picture. "It's us, and Daddy's watching us from the sky." Naomi smiled through a lump in her throat. "It's beautiful, my love." Vera leaned in to hug her mother, the necklace pressing softly against Naomi's cheek. And somewhere across the city, Richard smiled at a woman who lied to him, completely unaware that the proof of his real child's love, his true legacy, was glowing quietly on a little girl's chest. The afternoon was cruelly hot, the kind of heat that turned air thick and streets empty. Naomi lay on her thin mattress, weak and sweating, her body burning with fever. She'd been fighting the sickness for days, coughing, trembling, dizzy every time she tried to stand. Still, she forced herself to work until she simply couldn't anymore. That day, her body gave up. "Vera," she called faintly. Her little girl rushed from the corner, still wearing the gold necklace that never left her neck. Her eyes widened at her mother's pale face. "Yes, Mommy." Naomi's voice shook. "Please, go to the chemist down the street. Give them this paper and this money." She pressed a crumpled prescription into her daughter's hand, along with a few wrinkled bills. "Tell them it's for your mommy's medicine." Vera nodded quickly, tears already filling her eyes. "I'll go fast, I promise." Naomi brushed a hand over her daughter's cheek and managed a weak smile. "Be careful. Don't lose your necklace." "I won't, Mommy." And with that, Vera darted out into the burning afternoon, clutching the money in one hand, the note in the other, the gold pendant bouncing against her chest like a small heartbeat. Across town, Richard Hamilton was driving through the same neighborhood, his tinted SUV slicing through waves of heat. He wasn't supposed to be there. His driver had taken a detour to avoid traffic. He stared absently out the window, his mind spinning with thoughts of Trisha's supposed pregnancy. "I'm going to be a father," he whispered to himself. The words sounded right, but felt wrong. Something inside him stirred uneasily, like a faint alarm. A father. Could that really fill the emptiness he'd been carrying all these years? He sighed and leaned back, loosening his tie. Maybe this is it, he muttered. Maybe this is what I've been waiting for. But then fate intervened. As they turned onto a narrow street, Richard saw her. A little girl, barefoot, running with tears streaking down her face, holding a crumpled paper and a few bills. For a second, he thought nothing of it. Then the light hit her necklace. A flash of gold. Familiar. Too familiar. He froze. "Stop the car." The driver hesitated. "Sir? I said stop the car." The SUV screeched to a halt. Richard pushed the door open before the driver could react and stepped out into the heat, his heart racing. He walked toward the girl, toward that impossible glimmer of memory hanging around her neck. "Hey," he said softly, crouching. "Why are you crying?" The little girl wiped her face with her arm, sniffling. "My mommy's sick. I have to buy medicine." Richard looked at her. Really looked. She couldn't have been older than 5. Her small brown curls framed her face, and her eyes. Her eyes were the same deep shade of brown he sometimes saw in his dreams. Then he saw it clearly. The necklace. His necklace. The same one he had lost 5 years ago. The one engraved R. Hamilton. The world tilted. His breath caught in his throat. "Sweetheart, where did you get that necklace?" Vera stepped back, clutching it protectively. "Don't touch it," she said, her voice shaking but brave. "It's my daddy's necklace. Mommy said so." Richard blinked. "Your daddy's?" "Yes," she said, clutching it tighter. "He gave it to Mommy before I was born. She said it's the only thing he left." He felt his pulse thundering in his ears. The ground beneath him might as well have vanished. His voice was barely a whisper. "What's your mommy's name?" "Naomi," the girl said. "She's sick. I have to hurry." Naomi. The name crashed through him like lightning through glass. He staggered to his feet. "Where's your house?" Vera pointed down a narrow alley. "Over there. The one with the blue door." He turned to his driver, who had caught up, confused. "Go buy everything on that list," he ordered, handing him the crumpled paper. "Every single thing. Then bring it to that address." The driver nodded and ran off. Richard knelt again, forcing his voice to steady. "Come, sweetheart. Take me to your mommy." Vera hesitated for a moment, then slipped her small hand into his. "Okay," she whispered. And just like that, they walked together. A billionaire in polished shoes and a barefoot child, his own necklace glinting against her small chest. The alley was quiet, the air thick with the smell of dust and fried oil. Clothes hung from sagging lines. Dogs barked in the distance. When they reached the small house, Vera ran ahead. "Mommy! Mommy, I brought someone!" Richard followed slowly. Inside, the dim room smelled faintly of soap and illness. On a thin mattress lay a woman, pale and trembling. Her hair clung to her forehead, her eyes half open. When she turned toward the doorway, their eyes met. And for a heartbeat, time stopped. He knew that face. Even years later, through the exhaustion, through the fever, through the shadows of poverty, he knew her, Naomi, the woman from that night. The night he had tried to forget, or pretend never happened. Richard's knees almost buckled. Who are you?" Naomi whispered weakly. He swallowed hard, forcing words through a dry throat. "I saw your daughter. She said you were sick. I just wanted to help." Vera ran to her mother's side and knelt. "Mommy, he's nice. He bought your medicine." Naomi tried to sit up, but her body refused. Her voice came out broken. "You didn't have to—" "Thank you, sir." Her eyes drifted toward Vera's necklace, glinting faintly in the half-light. Richard's gaze followed. He couldn't stop staring. "That necklace," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "Where did you get it?" Naomi looked at him, confused. "It belonged to my daughter's father," she said softly. "He left it behind 5 years ago." Richard's throat tightened. "And his name?" he asked, though he already knew. She hesitated. "I only know what's written on it. R. Hamilton." Silence. Something raw and heavy filled the room. Richard felt his chest cave inward. The walls seemed to tilt around him. He took a slow step forward. "Naomi. That's my name." Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. "What?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. "That night, 5 years ago, the hotel. I was drunk, broken. I didn't know what I was doing. You, you were there. Naomi covered her mouth, trembling. Vera looked between them, confused. Mommy? Tears filled Naomi's eyes. So, you're the one. You're... Richard knelt beside the bed, his voice breaking. Yes, I'm her father. The driver returned just then, carrying the medicine. But Richard barely noticed. His world had already changed. He reached out, brushing his fingers over Vera's small curls. Sweetheart, he said softly, tears in his voice. I'm your daddy. Vera blinked up at him, wide-eyed. Then slowly she smiled. Really? He nodded, his throat tight. Naomi covered her face, sobbing quietly. Not from shame this time, but from the unbearable weight of relief. For 5 years she had prayed to know the truth. And now at last it had walked through her door. The evening that followed felt like something from another lifetime. For hours, Richard sat in Naomi's small, dimly lit room. A man who owned skyscrapers, now humbled by a cracked ceiling and a mother's strength. The fever had broken. The medicine was working. Naomi could finally sit up, pale but steady. Her daughter slept beside her, curled under a faded blanket, the gold necklace glinting faintly in the dark. Richard stared at it, his necklace, the same piece he had once worn like a careless ornament. Now it rested on the heart of a child who was half him. I can't believe it, he whispered. All these years. Naomi's eyes were distant, filled with exhaustion and disbelief. You didn't know, she said softly. Neither did I. I tried to find you once. I even went back to that hotel, but no one remembered you. Richard rubbed his face, guilt burning in his chest. That night, I was drunk. My business partner had betrayed me, and I'd lost everything I trusted. I barely remembered my own name. I thought... He stopped, shame twisting his words. I thought someone had arranged for you to be there. Naomi shook her head, her voice trembling. I was just tired, dizzy. I wandered into the wrong room and fell asleep. Silence hung between them, thick with memory and what-ifs. I'm sorry, Richard said at last. I can't change that night, but I can change everything from now on. Let me take care of you both, please. Naomi stared at him, unsure whether to believe the kindness in his voice. Take care of us. What does that mean? It means you don't have to live like this anymore, he said firmly. You and Vera. Come with me. I'll give her the life she deserves. I'll give you the peace you've been denied. Tears filled her eyes again, not of sadness but disbelief. He reached across and took her trembling hand. Let me be a father to her, he said softly. Let me make things right. Later that evening, a black SUV pulled up before the Hamilton mansion. The security guard nearly dropped his clipboard when he saw Richard stepping out, holding a little girl in one arm and helping a fragile-looking woman with the other. Naomi's breath caught as she looked up at the mansion's towering white walls and gleaming windows. It was like another planet, one she'd only ever seen from the street. Wow, Vera gasped. Mommy, is this a palace? Richard smiled gently. It's home, he said. Inside, the mansion felt impossibly big. The marble floors reflected their footsteps. A chandelier hung above them, like frozen sunlight. Naomi stood awkwardly by the doorway, clutching Vera's hand. You can rest here, Richard said kindly. Everything you need is yours. There are rooms upstairs. Choose whichever you like. You're safe now. Naomi's voice was a whisper. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. He smiled. Please, Richard. Just Richard. He bent down and lifted Vera in his arms. And you, little princess, he said, spinning her gently until she laughed. You never have to worry again. Naomi's heart softened as she watched him. The way he looked at his daughter, the way Vera's laughter filled the mansion that had once been cold. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe in something better. But peace, it seemed, was never meant to last. 3 hours later, a black coupe pulled into the driveway. Heels clicked against the marble path, sharp and impatient. Trisha. She entered with her usual confidence, perfect hair, flawless dress, until she saw the scene before her, a strange woman standing in her living room, a child playing with Richard's tie. Her smile vanished. "Who are you?" she snapped, her voice slicing through the air. Naomi turned, startled. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Richard brought me and my daughter here. I didn't ask for your story," Tricia said coldly. "I asked why you're in my house." Richard's name caught Naomi's lips, but before she could speak, Tricia stepped closer, fury burning in her eyes. "Get out!" Naomi's face went pale. "Please, ma'am, I don't think you I said get out!" Tricia shouted, her voice echoing off the marble. Vera ran to her mother, frightened. Naomi held her close, her voice shaking. "Please don't yell. Mr. Richard said—" Tricia's rage boiled over. "Richard wouldn't bring people like you here." She shoved Naomi toward the door. Vera screamed, "Mommy!" Naomi stumbled, clutching her daughter, but Tricia's shove was harder this time. Naomi fell against the iron gate, losing her grip. Vera slipped from her arms, falling forward, her cheek striking the sharp edge of the gatepost. The sound, that small cry of pain, tore through Naomi's heart like a blade. "Mommy, it hurts!" the girl sobbed, blood trickling down her face. Naomi's world blurred. She grabbed her daughter, pressing a piece of her own skirt to the wound. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Tricia folded her arms, sneering. "That's what happens when you trespass where you don't belong." Naomi looked up, horrified. "How could you? She's a child." "Then take your child and go," Tricia snapped. She turned away and slammed the mansion door shut behind her. Hours passed. The sky turned from gold to gray to black. Naomi and Vera sat outside the mansion gates, the child asleep in her lap, a blood-stained cloth pressed to her cheek. Naomi hadn't eaten. She couldn't leave. She just sat there, staring at the door that had been closed on them. When headlights appeared down the drive, she didn't move. The SUV stopped. Richard stepped out, still in his work suit. The moment he saw them, his heart stopped. He rushed forward. "Naomi! Vera! What happened?" Naomi's lips trembled. You're madam. She threw us out. She pushed me. Vera fell and got hurt." Richard's face darkened. Fury replaced shock. He lifted Vera gently, cradling her against his chest, and turned to Naomi. "Come inside. Both of you, now." He stormed through the gates, his jaw clenched, and pushed open the door to the mansion. Tricia was sitting on the couch, sipping wine, pretending nothing had happened. When she saw them, her smile froze. "Richard, get up," he said, his voice cold as steel. Tricia blinked, startled. "What?" "I said, get up." She stood slowly, confused by the fire in his eyes. He took a step forward. "What is wrong with you? You saw a woman and child here, and instead of calling me, you threw them out? You hurt them." Tricia's voice rose defensively. "She doesn't belong here. Who is she anyway? And that child?" "That child," Richard shouted, "is my daughter." The words struck like thunder. Tricia's face went blank. "What?" "My blood," Richard said, his chest heaving. "My daughter. I just found out days ago." Tricia staggered back, eyes wide. But I'm pregnant with your child." Richard laughed bitterly. "You think that makes this right? You think that gives you the right to harm an innocent child?" Tricia's mouth quivered, but no words came. He pointed to the staircase. "Don't ever go near them again, ever, or I swear this house will no longer be yours." Tricia froze, realizing something terrifying. The power in his voice wasn't anger alone. It was love, real love, and it wasn't hers anymore. That night, Naomi sat quietly in a guest room while Richard tended to Vera's bandaged cheek. The little girl had fallen asleep against his chest, her small fingers still gripping his shirt. Richard looked down at her, his daughter, and felt something inside him shift forever. When he looked up, Naomi was watching him, eyes red but calm. "Thank you," she whispered. Richard smiled faintly, his voice low. "No, thank you for giving me back my heart." The morning came soft and golden, a kind of calm the Hamilton mansion hadn't known in years. Richard sat in the garden, his shirt sleeves rolled up, watching Vera pick flowers near the fountain. She laughed every few seconds, holding each flower to the sunlight as if she were showing it to the world. Naomi sat nearby, quietly folding laundry, her face relaxed for the first time in a long time. Every so often, Richard caught himself staring at the way Naomi's hair caught the light, at the warmth that seemed to follow her wherever she stood. The mansion had been silent for so long, sterile and beautiful, but hollow. Now it felt alive again. When Vera ran to him with a small bunch of daisies, Richard took them carefully, pretending they were treasure. "These are for you, Daddy," she said, grinning. "Thank you, Princess," he replied softly, tucking one into his shirt pocket. "I'll keep them forever." Naomi smiled faintly, her eyes shining. For a moment, everything was perfect. But upstairs in her bedroom, Tricia stood by the window clutching a glass of wine, her knuckles white. She had been watching them, Naomi, Vera, and Richard, every day since that night. Watching how his laughter came easier now, how his footsteps no longer echoed with loneliness. The jealousy grew like a sickness inside her. She grabbed her phone and dialed quickly. "Cynthia," she hissed. Her friend's voice came through the speaker. "Hey, babe, did he propose yet?" Tricia's eyes darkened. "No, that's the problem. Your stupid advice ruined everything. That fake pregnancy trick? It's not working anymore. He's always with her now. That woman and her child. He treats them like family. He barely even looks at me." There was a pause. Then Cynthia sighed. "Wait, you're saying he found someone else? And her kid? What if the kid's not even his?" Tricia laughed bitterly. "He claims it is. Says he found out recently." "Well then," Cynthia said dryly, "you need to do something fast. If he finds out you lied—" "Relax," Tricia cut in. "He won't." But she was wrong. Because just outside her half-closed door, Richard had stopped mid-step, the tray of tea in his hands trembling. He had heard every word. The air went still. For a moment he simply stood there, his heart pounding in disbelief. Then he placed the tray down slowly and walked away, his face pale, his jaw tight. When he appeared in the hallway a few minutes later, Tricia turned from the window and froze. "Richard," she began carefully, "I didn't hear you come in." His voice was calm, too calm. "We need to talk." He led her downstairs to his study. The air in the room was cool and heavy, the silence between them thicker than marble. He turned to face her, arms folded. "You lied to me." Her lips parted. What do you mean?" "I heard you," he said, his tone cold and unshakable. "You're not pregnant. You never were." Tricia's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "Richard, please, I did it because I love you." "Love?" His laugh was short and bitter. "You don't lie to someone you love, Tricia. You manipulate them. You played with my trust. You tried to trap me." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just didn't want to lose you." "You already did," he said quietly. He walked to the door and opened it. "Leave, Tricia. Now." Her hands trembled. "Please, don't do this. Don't choose her over me. She's nothing, Richard. She's a mistake." He turned back, his expression dark and sharp. "That mistake gave me the one thing you never could, peace. And that nothing raised my daughter alone when I didn't even know she existed." Tricia's tears fell freely now. "So that's it?" "Yes," he said. "That's it." He stepped aside and she walked past him silently, heels clicking like the final beats of a broken heart. When the front door closed, the mansion felt quiet again, but not empty. That evening, Richard sat on the balcony with Naomi. The sunset painted the sky in streaks of orange and violet. Vera was in the garden again, chasing butterflies. "I heard what happened," Naomi said softly. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be. She built our relationship on lies. I built my silence on guilt. We both lived in shadows, but you—" He turned toward her, eyes gentle. "You've been light since the moment I met you." Naomi blushed faintly, looking down. "Richard, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," he murmured. "Both of you." Her voice trembled. "You mean that?" He nodded. "I lost years I can't get back, but I won't lose another day without you and Vera." Naomi looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had once been strangers. Now they were home. Days later, Richard took them both to meet his father. Chief Hamilton waited on the balcony of his grand estate, dressed in white, his silver hair glowing in the sunlight. When he saw Richard approach with Naomi and a small child, confusion crossed his face. "Son," he said slowly, "who are these?" Richard knelt, holding Vera's hand. "Dad," he said proudly, "this is my daughter, Vera Hamilton." The old man blinked. "Your what?" "My daughter," Richard repeated, "the one I didn't know I had." He turned to Naomi, his hand finding hers. "And this is Naomi, the woman who raised her alone, the woman who saved me without even knowing it." Chief Hamilton's stern expression softened. He looked from Naomi to Vera, at the girl's shy smile, at the necklace gleaming against her small chest. Finally, the old man's face broke into a slow, proud smile. "Welcome home, my daughter," he said to Naomi. Then he bent down and hugged Vera. "And welcome, my granddaughter." Vera's laughter rang out like bells. "Hi, Grandpa." Richard felt something loosen inside him. Something he hadn't known was still tied in knots. Weeks later, the mansion was alive again, filled with laughter, with movement, with life. Naomi ran the small Hamilton Foundation Richard had started in her name, a charity for single mothers and women who'd been abandoned like she once was. Vera began school in a beautiful uniform, carrying her sketchbook everywhere she went, and Richard, the man who had once lived behind marble and mirrors, finally smiled without effort. One evening, as the sun dipped low, he sat beside Naomi in the garden. Vera was asleep inside, a storybook still in her hand. He leaned close and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." Naomi smiled through tears. "No," she said softly, "you found us." He took her hand, pressed it to his heart, and said quietly, "You were wearing my necklace the day we met. But you brought me more than that. You brought me home." The story ended the way it was always meant to, not in wealth or perfection, but in truth. Because love built on lies will always crumble, but love born from truth, even when it comes late, will always stand. And sometimes the things we've been searching for our whole lives are not far away at all, just waiting for us to finally see them.